Hello. Hi. Good evening to our distinguished guests and invitees. Equal Ground warmly welcomes everyone to our International Women's Day 2023 event. To start off, we would like to welcome our Executive Director, Rosanna Flema-Caldera, to deliver the welcome speech.
සුබ සන්ධ්‍යාවක් ඔබ සැමට 2023 ජාත්‍යන්තර කාන්තා දින උත්සවයට Equal Ground එහි අපි සැවම ඔබ සියලු දෙනා සාදරයෙන් පිළිගනිමු. පළමුවෙන්ම පිළිගැනීමේ කතාව ඉදිරිපත් කිරීමට අපගේ විධායක අධ්‍යක්ෂිකා රොසානා ෆ්ලේම-කාල්දේරාට ගෞරවයෙන් ආරාධනා කර සිටිනවා.
அனைவருக்கும் மாலை வணக்கம். 2023ஆம் ஆண்டு சர்வதேச மகளிர் தின நினைவையொட்டி வருகை தந்திங்கே குழுமியிருக்கும் உங்கள் அனைவரையும் வருக வருகவென்று ஈக்குவல் கிரவுண்ட் சார்பாக வரவேற்கிறோம். இந்த நிகழ்ச்சியை ஆரம்பித்து வைக்கும் முகமாக ஈக்குவல் கிரவுண்டின் நிர்வாக இயக்குனரான ரொசானா ஃப்ளேம-கால்தேராவை அழைக்கிறோம் சிறப்பு உரைப்பை வழங்குமாறு. நன்றி.
Your Excellencies, members of the LGBTIQ community, allies and friends, a very good evening and welcome to this International Women's Day 2023, organized by Equal Ground Sri Lanka. Today, we celebrate all women from all facets of life and intersections of faith, race, ethnicity, disability, gender identity, and sexual orientation. This event was organized in the pursuit of celebrating the social, cultural, economic, and political achievements of women, to recognize different challenges women face, and to increase awareness on women's rights and gender equality. This year's theme for International Women's Day is Innovation and Technology for Gender Equity. And we hope to recognize and champion women and girls who have incorporated technology and digital innovation in their line of work as a strategy to overcome challenges, to achieve gender equality, and for the empowerment of women and girls. It is also important to explore the impact of the digital gender gap on widening economic and social inequalities. According to the latest Gender Gap Index announced by the World Economic Forum, Sri Lanka ranked 110 out of 146 countries and was further ranked at 122 in the Economic Participation and Opportunity Sub-Index. Furthermore, the digital gender gap is reported to be highest among the South Asian region, creating greater inequalities. It is vital to protect the rights of women and girls in digital spaces, and bringing women into technology results in more creative solutions and has greater potential for innovations that meet women's needs and promotes gender equality. Equal Ground is an organization that strives for economic, social, cultural, civil, and political rights for all, including the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, questioning, and queer community of Sri Lanka. And we have taken strides to narrow the gap on gender equality and to eliminate all forms of discrimination against women. As the Executive Director of Equal Ground, Sri Lanka, I filed a case with the UN CEDAW in 2018, and earlier last year, the CEDAW committee gave a groundbreaking decision where the committee called for the decriminalization of consensual same-sex relationships between women and for the adoption of comprehensive measures to protect lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and intersex women. This was the first international human rights case to address the criminalization of lesbian women's sexuality, and only the second case ever by a UN human rights treaty body in relation to decriminalization of consensual same-sex conduct. This was a landmark decision with global implications, where the committee drew attention to the nuances of gender-based violence, and the decision further contributes to the committee's growing jurisprudence on gender-based violence against women. At home, we are heartened by the Foreign Minister Ali Sabri's comments at the UN UPR of Sri Lanka, where he stated that Sri Lanka will decriminalize adult same-sex relationships. Equal Ground has consistently made shadow reports to the UN treaty bodies, including the UPR, since 2008. So we are extremely heartened that with the support of several foreign missions and governments and their recommendations to the Sri Lankan government to decriminalize consenting adult same-sex relationships, we have finally received a commitment by the government of Sri Lanka to decriminalize. It's been a rather long time coming. Yeah. Some of us in this room have been doing this for a very long time, so yeah, it's heartening. Another positive outcome has been a fundamental rights case against the police and Amar Dissanayake at the Court of Appeal. Although it was a partial success, it is a great win for the trans community, and we're so happy about that. The police have now distributed a circular that informs every police station in the country on guidelines on how to be respectful of trans persons and their rights. We have reopened the case to push for this circular to include the entire LGBTIQ community. I'd also like to point out the huge attitudinal changes that have occurred within society over the years. This is due to the hard work of many of my colleagues at Equal Ground and all the organizations and groups that are now operational post-2015. The CEDAW case, the UPR results, and the court case were incredible victories in our pursuit of equality and justice, and we recognize and celebrate how far we've come towards achieving our goals, and also acknowledge how far we have left to go. We remain firm in our resolve and committed in our pursuit. I would like to end by thanking the Equality Fund of Canada for their generous support of this event. I also want to thank my staff. They've been at it since morning, getting everything ready, and this has been at least a 2-month undertaking to put this all together. I hope you like the decor. It's all them, so I'm really happy and thankful to all of them. And I would like to thank all of you for being here this evening. So I'm going to now welcome Tashi to the stage. Well, not really a stage, but here, for her performance. Let's warmly welcome her with a round of applause, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tashi, very, very much.
Thank you, Tashi, for that wonderful performance. We would now like to present a short film about a story based on the experiences of LGBTQ women in Sri Lanka. Please note that the film is in Tamil language and subtitles are available in English. If Sinhala translations are required, kindly make use of the headphones provided. If you'd like them, please raise your hand and someone will come and hand over one to you. Enjoy.
අපි දැන් ඔබට අපගේ කෙටි චිත්‍රපටයක් ඉදිරිපත් කරන්න ලෑස්ති. මෙයට ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ සමරිසි, ද්විරිසි, සංක්‍රාන්ති සමාජභාවී සහ ක්වියර් කාන්තාවන්ගේ අත්දැකීම් පාදක කරගෙන නිර්මාණය වූවක්. මෙම චිත්‍රපටය දමිළ බසින් සහ ඉංග්‍රීසි උපසිරැසි සමග බව කාරුණිකව සලකන්න. ඔබට අවශ්‍ය නම් සපයා ඇති භාෂා පරිවර්තන උපකරණ වල සහාය ලබා ගන්න පුළුවන්. ඔබ අත එසෙව්වොත් අපේ ස්ටාෆ් එකේ කෙනෙක් ඒ ඔබට ලබා දෙයි. ස්තුතියි.
நன்றி தஸ்வி, அருமையான பாடலை எங்களுக்கு தந்தமைக்காக. இதோ இப்பொழுது நாங்கள் ஒரு காணொளியை கண்டுகளிக்க போகிறோம். இந்த காணொளியானது இலங்கையில் உள்ள தன்பால் ஈர்ப்பின, ஈர்ப்பால் ஈர்ப்பின, பால் புதுமை பெண்களுக்கு திருநர்களோடும் உட்பட அவர்கள் அனுபவிக்கின்ற சொல்லொன்னா துயர்களில் எண்ணில் அடங்கா காரியங்கள் என்னென்ன என்பதை பற்றி ஒரு அம்சத்தை கொண்ட ஒரு கதையை நாங்கள் ஒரு சிறிய காணொளியாக குறுந்திரைப்படமாக கொடுத்திருக்கிறோம். இதனை நாங்கள் ஐஜி ஃபில்முடன் இணைந்து நாங்கள் செயற்பட்டு அதை உங்களுக்கு வழங்கவிருக்கிறோம். இதோ உங்களுக்காக அந்த காணொளியை கண்டு கழியுங்கள். நன்றி.
இந்த பாரத சமக்கணும்னு தலையில எழுதிருந்தா யாரால மாத்த முடியும்? வண்ணாத்து பூச்சிக்கு தன்னோட சிறகுகள் எப்போதுமே பாரம் இல்லைக்கா. வாங்க. ஏன் என்னோட ஃபோன் ஆன்சர் பண்ணல? என்ன ப்ராப்ளம்? ஏண்டி அழுகுற? எது கோவமா இருக்கியா? நான் ஏன் ரம்யா அவனை சந்திச்சேன்? நமக்குள்ள இதுக்காக இப்படி ஒரு உணர்வு ஏற்பட்டுச்சு. சின்ன வயசுல இருந்தே நீ தான் என் பெஸ்டின்னு நினைச்சிட்டு இருந்தேன். ஆனா ஒரு வயசுக்கு அப்புறம் தான் நம்ம ரெண்டு பேத்துக்குள்ள இருக்குது வெறும் ஃப்ரெண்ட்ஷிப் இல்லை, அதையும் தாண்டி ஏதோன்னு புரிஞ்சுக்கிட்டேன். என் உலகமே நீ தானே ஆனதுக்கு அப்புறம் எல்லாமே என் கையை மீறி போயிருமோன்னு பயமா இருக்கு ரம்யா. நினைச்சேன் ஏதோ பிரச்சனைன்னு. என்ன நடந்துச்சு? நம்ம விஷயம் வீட்ல தெரிஞ்சிருச்சு. சொல்லிட்டியா? சொல்ல வேண்டிய கட்டாயம். திடீர்னு யாரோ ஒருத்தனை காட்டி கல்யாணம் பண்ணிக்க சொல்லி என்ன ஃபோர்ஸ் பண்றாங்க. ப்ரெஷர் தாங்காம சொல்லிட்டேன். அவன்னு தெரிஞ்சதுக்கே எப்படின்னா அவன்னு தெரிஞ்சா கொன்னுருவாங்க. தைரியமா சொல்ல வேண்டியது தானேடி. ஏன் என்ன சாகடிக்கிறதுக்கு அவங்க? ஓகே, நான் நாளைக்கு உன் வீட்டுல வந்து பேசுறேன். உனக்கு என்ன பைத்தியமா ரம்யா? அவ போடி. நாளைக்கு என்ன பண்ண போறேன்னு சொல்லிட்டு போ ரம்யா. சீதாவை ராவணிக்கிட்ட இருந்து தூக்கிட்டு வர போறேன். எந்த படையோடையும் இல்ல. இந்த ராமன் தனியா தான் வருவான், அதே மாதிரி இந்த ரம்யா தனியா தான் வருவான்.
என்னம்மா ஸ்கூல் அரங்கேற்றத்துக்கு போகலையா?
எதுக்குப்பா போகணும்?
சீக்கிரம் அரங்கேற்றத்தை முடிச்சிட்டு கல்யாணம் கட்டுற வேலையை பாரு.
ரம்யா, எனக்கு அம்மாவை நினைச்சா ரொம்ப பயமா இருக்கு ரம்யா. என் அம்மா அப்பா பத்தி எனக்கு தெரியும் தானே. நாங்க எந்த தப்பும் பண்ணல லேக்கா. ஒரு அம்மா அப்பாவா பிள்ளைங்க என்ன ஃபீல் பண்றாங்கன்னு அவங்களுக்கு புரியணும். நீ பயப்படாம இரு, நான் புரிய வைக்கிறேன்.
வெளியில் ரொம்ப வெயில் சுட்ட இருக்குது. சரோ, கொஞ்சம் குடிக்க தண்ணி கொண்டாமா.
இருங்க கொண்டு வரேன். ரம்யா வாமா.
ரம்யாவா? வாமா. இன்னும் ரொம்ப நாளைக்கு அப்புறம் லேக்காவை பார்க்க வந்தியா?
இல்ல அங்கிள், உங்களையும் ஆண்டி தான் பார்க்க வந்தேன்.
என்ன விஷயம்?
உங்க ரெண்டு பேர்கிட்டயும் ஒரு முக்கியமான விஷயம் பேசணும். லேக்காக்கு வரம் பாக்குறீங்கன்னு சொன்னா?
ஆமாம்மா, நம்ம சொந்தத்திலேயே ஒரு பையனை பார்த்து வச்சிருக்கோம். ஆனா இவ தான் எவனே ஒரு பையனை லவ் பண்ணிட்டு வந்து நம்ம தலையில குண்டை தூக்கி போட்டாளே. யாருன்னு கேட்டா சொல்றாலும் இல்ல. உனக்காச்சு யாருன்னு தெரியுமாமா?
ஆள் யாருன்னு எனக்கு தெரியும்.
தெரியுமா? யார் ரம்யா?
சொல்றேன். அதுக்கு முன்னாடி நான் உங்க ரெண்டு பேர்கிட்டயும் சில கேள்விகள் கேட்கலாமா?
கேள்விகளா?
ம். உங்க பொண்ணோட வாழ்க்கை துணை எப்படி இருக்கணும்னு எதிர்பார்க்குறீங்க ஆண்டி?
நல்லா படிச்சு கை நிறைய சம்பாதிக்கிற உத்தியோகத்துல இருக்கணும்.
நல்ல ஒரு கௌரவமான குடும்பத்தை சேர்ந்தவனா இருக்கணும். வேற என்ன, இதுகள் இருந்தாலே போதும்.
அப்படியா? உங்க பொண்ணு லவ் பண்றத வாழ்க்கை துணை கிட்ட நீங்க எதிர்பார்க்குற எல்லாமே இருக்கு. நீங்க எதிர்பார்க்காதது கூட இருக்கு.
அப்படி என்ன இருக்கா?
அன்பு, பாசம், அக்கறை,
காதல். அப்பா அம்மாக்கு இல்லாத அக்கறை காதலுக்கு வந்துற போகுது.
நீங்க அக்கறைன்னு எது நினைக்கிறீங்க ஆண்டி?
அவ நோய் நொடி இல்லாம கஷ்டப்படாம கடைசி வரைக்கும் சொகுசா ஒரு வாழ்க்கை வாழணும்.
நோய் நொடி சொகுசு எல்லாமே உடம்புக்கு தானே ஆண்டி? தாம்பத்திய வாழ்க்கையில உடம்பை விட மனசு ரொம்ப முக்கியமே. மனசுக்கு பிடிக்காத ஒரு காரியத்தை ஒருத்தரால எப்படி பண்ண வைக்க முடியும் நீங்க நினைக்கிறீங்க?
இந்த காலத்து பிள்ளைங்க சினிமா படத்தை பார்த்து பார்த்து நல்லா வசனம் பேச கத்துக்கிடுச்சுங்க.
விடுங்க, நீ சொல்றியே அந்த பையன் என்ன அவ்வளவு நல்லவனா?
உங்க பொண்ணு லேக்கா லவ் பண்றது நல்ல பையன் இல்ல. நல்ல பொண்ணு. அண்ட் உங்க பொண்ணு லவ் பண்ற அந்த பொண்ணு நாங்க என்ன தப்பு பண்ணோம்? ஒருவேளை நீ பெண்ணாகவோ நான் ஆணாகவோ இருந்திருந்தா, இல்லைன்னா நான் ஆணாகவோ நீ பெண்ணாகவோ இருந்திருந்தா உங்க அப்பா அம்மா இதுக்கெல்லாம் சம்மதிச்சிருப்பாங்கல்ல? ஆக எல்லாத்துக்குமே உறவ உணர்வா யாருமே பாக்குறது இல்லைல்ல, உடம்பா தான் பாக்குறீங்கல்ல.
இந்த பாருமா, ஒரு ஆணுக்கும் ஒரு பெண்ணுக்கும் ஒரு ஆணுக்கும் அதுதான் சமநிலை.
எதுப்பா சமநிலை? சமனுக்கு முன்னாடியும் பின்னாடியும் வருமே. ஒரே பெருமதியான தானம் தானேப்பா வருது. ஏன் அது ஒரு பொண்ணாவும் இருக்கக்கூடாதுன்னு நினைக்கிறீங்க? உங்க வம்சம் விருத்தி ஆகாதுன்னு நினைக்கிறீங்களா? அதுக்கு இப்ப மெஞ்ஞானமும் விஞ்ஞானமுமே பதில் தந்துருமே. இந்த உலகத்துல எவ்வளவோ அப்பாவியான குழந்தைங்க இருக்காங்களே, அவங்களுக்கு நானே எவ்வளவு ஒரு அப்பா அம்மாவா இருந்துட்டு போயிடுறோம். அப்பா எங்களுக்குள்ள இருக்கிற உணர்வு தண்ணிக்குள்ள இருக்கிற மீன் மாதிரி. அது சரியான இடத்துல எடுத்தாதான்ப்பா நிம்மதியா உயிர் வாழும். அது பலவந்தமா பிடிச்சு வெளியே எடுத்தா அது துடிக்கும், மூச்சு விட கஷ்டப்படும், ஏன் செத்து கூட போயிருப்பா. இது நம்ம தப்பு இல்லப்பா, நம்ம சாபமும் இல்லம்மா. நாங்க உங்ககிட்ட கேக்குறது வரோம். நாங்க சந்தோஷமா வாழணும்னு ஆசைப்படுறோம். எங்களை விட்டுருங்க.
We hope this message resonated with you. A little reminder that this session will be conducted in English, and if you require translations in Sinhala or Tamil, headsets will be handed out. If you do wish to use them, please do raise your hand and someone will come and hand one over. And now we are excited to invite our panelists for the evening. And please do join us on stage. Ms. Ambika Satkunathan, lawyer and former commissioner of the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka. Anya Ratnayaka, wildlife researcher and conservationist specializing on fishing cats. Dinara Punchiheva, film and theatre actor. Samadhi Veersingha, founder of the label Anuk and creative director of Daraz Fashion. And finally, environmental and civil activist Gianna De Souza. This session will be moderated by Rosanna Flema Caldera.
මෙම චිත්‍රපටයේ එන පණිවිඩය ඔබගේ හදවතට දැන නැති කියලා අපි හිතනවා. අපි දැන් විද්වත් සංවාදයට අපගේ ආරාධිතයන්ට ඉතා ගෞරවයෙන් ආරාධනා කරනවා. නීතිඥ හා ශ්‍රී ලංකා මානව හිමිකම් කොමිෂන් සභාවේ හිටපු සභාපති අම්බිකා සත්කුන්නාතම්මිය, වනජීවී පර්යේෂක සහ හඳුන් දෙවියන් පිළිබඳ විශේෂ සංරක්ෂක ආන්‍යා රත්නායක, සිනමා හා වේදිකා නාට්‍ය නිලි දිනාරා පුංචිහේවා, අනුක් වෙළඳ නාමයේ නිර්මාතෘ සහ ඩරාස් ෆැෂන් හි නිර්මාණාධ්‍යක්ෂක සමාධි වීරසිංහ සහ පාරිසරික සහ සිවිල් ක්‍රියාකාරී ජියානා ඩිසොයිසා මෙම විද්වත් සාකච්ඡාව මෙහෙවීම සඳහා රොසැනා ෆ්ලේම කාල්දේරා වෙතත් ආරාධනා කරනවා. නැවත මතක් කරනවා මෙම විද්වත් සාකච්ඡාව ඉංග්‍රීසි භාෂාවෙන් පමණක් පවත්වන බැවින් ඔබට පරිවර්තන උපකරණ අවශ්‍ය නම් අතොසවා එය ලබා ගන්න. ස්තුතියි.
இந்த குறுந்திரைப்படமானது உங்களை மகிழ்வித்திருக்கும் என்று நம்புகிறோம். இப்பொழுது எங்களுடைய பேரவையின் குழு உறுப்பினர்களை அறிமுகப்படுத்துவதில் நாங்கள் பெருமிதம் அடைகிறோம். சட்டத்தரணையும் இலங்கை மனித உரிமைகள் ஆணைக்குழுவின் முன்னாள் ஆணையாளருமான திருமதி அம்பிகா சட்குநாதன் அவர்களையும், வனவிலங்கு ஆராய்ச்சியாளரும் குள்ள சிறுத்தை பாதுகாப்பு நிபுணத்துவம் பெற்ற ஆன்யா ரத்நாயக் அவர்களையும் திரைப்பட மற்றும் நாடக நடிகையுமான தினாரா புன்சியேவா அவர்களையும் EQUVலின் நிறுவர் மற்றும் டராஸ் பேஷன் படைப்பாக்க இயக்குனருமான சமாதி வீரசிங் அவர்களையும் இறுதியாக சுற்றாடல் மற்றும் சிவில் செயற்பாற்றுமான ஜியானாடி சொய்சா அவர்களையும் நாங்கள் வரவேற்பதில் மட்டற்ற மகிழ்ச்சி அடைகிறோம். மேலும் இந்த அமர்வானது ரொசானா ஃப்ளேம கல்தேரா தலைமையில் நிர்வகிக்கப்படும் என்பதை அறிய தருகிறோம். அத்துடன் மொழிபெயர்ப்பானது வழங்கப்படுகிறது. மொழிபெயர்ப்பு சேவை இருக்கிறபடியால் தங்களுக்கு தமிழோ சிங்களத்திலோ மொழிபெயர்ப்பு அவசியம் எனில் தயவு செய்து உங்களுடைய கையை உயர்த்தி காட்டி மொழிபெயர்ப்பு சேவையை பெற்றுக்கொள்ளவும். நன்றி, வணக்கம்.
Thank you, Suresh, Sharia, and Kaushalya. I'm really excited. I mean, look at this panel. They're just amazing, a bunch of people. I have to be the oldest person here, but I'll survive. Okay, so we're going to ask you 3 questions each, okay? And put you on the spot, of course. Embarrass you a little bit, maybe. No, I'm just kidding, all right? So I'm going to start with you, Ambika, first. So what is your approach towards the private members' bill to amend the penal code, section 365 and 365A? And should we amend or repeal?
Okay. Thanks, Rosanna, for inviting me to be part of this. And I think you already know the answer to the question, which is why you asked me the question. My answer, of course, is that it should be repealed and not amended. That is the short answer. The long version, I will just quickly go through what the private members bill is proposing. So the first question for us here is, why do we have a private members bill, right? Because even if you do have a private members bill, it has to go through various stages, and that process is actually in the hands of the government. So in which case, why are they trying to get someone, a member of parliament, to place this when they have the power to determine the ultimate outcome? So it seems in a way like a cop-out. We want to do this, but we do not want to take responsibility because maybe they are perhaps afraid of the reactions. So what they have done is, we have 365 and 365A. So in 365A, the words publicly or privately or with another person have been inserted, and they've got various categories. So without the consent of a person, if the person is under 16 years, and if the person is in lawful or unlawful detention, and those are the categories which they have, or if the person is of unsound mind or was in a state of intoxication. So these are the categories that they have included, and they have said that the intent of this amendment is that it must be considered as amending the provisions that make sexual orientation a punishable offense. Now, the problem is that the amendment still seeks to criminalize what they call acts of gross indecency. But we have no definition for acts of gross indecency. And of course, they're bringing in the detention aspect, because in detention, abuses do take place and they can take place. So they seem to be wanting to prevent that. You can look at that as a positive. And of course, we know the power dynamics in places of detention, many allegations of torture, Supreme Court decisions of torture that has also included sexual violence, etc. But the problem here is that it does not address the root causes of the problem, which is the violent nature of the police, the abuses that take place, the lack of due process, and also we already have a law. We have the Convention Against Torture Act, under which you could actually use to hold these people accountable. We have the penal code, which has numerous provisions. Maybe I will just also mention a few, which is like 363, 364, 365B, 360B, 365, and also they really don't need to retain this. And of course, where section 365 is concerned, they are retaining the criminalization of carnal intercourse with animals. Now, once again, we already have a law. It is called the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act. And that has various provisions in it. I won't go into it and bore you, but those provisions exist, which means that this amendment appears to be redundant, which raises the question, why on earth are they amending it and they're not repealing it? And it also raises the question because we do see the state being oppressive in many instances. Activists are being arrested, etc. So, and we are coming up for review in front of various international mechanisms. So is this then a way of saying, okay, we will amend this, but we're not going to repeal it? So it seems like, tick the box. And of course, it creates also conflict within activists and within organizations. And that kind of instability, I think the state also likes. The other point is that we have vague and undefined phrases like gross indecency, which can and have been abused in the past. There's also a very important element, which is the psychological aspect of it. Because if you amend it, in the minds of the police, they will think, they're not going to look at all the aspects, which words have been deleted, which phrases have been included, etc. Not really, not in practice. So the importance of repealing it and completely wiping it off the statute books, I think that cannot be underestimated.
And we also know what happened in 1995 when they attempted to amend the penal code and messed it up completely, and now we're all criminals. So I'm going to switch to Anya. Anya, hi.
Hi.
Your first question is, the field of conservation is a relatively lesser known career option, especially for a woman. What challenges did you face when starting off?
Challenges, God, where do I begin? There was a lot of sexism, and there still is a lot of sexism. There was, like general questions about why I'm here. Am I going to get dark? Where's my husband? Does he know I'm here? Things like that. Then there was just the blatant ignoring my presence in the room, especially in government situations. At the time, I think I was, oh God, I can't remember how old I was, 25, I think. And so I'd go for a meeting, and because I was like a young woman, I'd even if I was more qualified than the people in the room in terms of subject matter, they'd completely gloss over the fact that I spoke, and they'd just look straight through me. Then there was the sexism at my workplaces where the men, most of the men at least, would, or most of the straight men, I guess, I don't know, they would kind of make these real sexist jokes. And if, just commenting on a woman's body, or even if we're on a website, they'll say something about a woman's photograph, or just if a woman walked past, everyone would just stop and stare, which is so awkward for the rest of the women in the room. And if we ever brought this up or just acted uncomfortable, they'd be like, learn to take a joke. We're just kidding. So just general things like that, which just made working really difficult, especially as a young woman. So it took a lot to kind of get out of that. So
why fishing cats?
Why fishing cats?
Yeah.
Why not fishing cats?
Yes. Good answer.
Yeah.
We're going to switch to Dinara. Thank you for being here.
Thanks.
So the cinema industry is sadly fraught with stereotypes, yeah? And double standards, especially against female artists. How do you feel that these can be addressed and improved in Sri Lanka? And have you faced anything yourself on your way to where you are right now and further?
Well, I think social constructs, exist everywhere. It's not only the cinema industry, but obviously it seeps through to the cinema industry, whether it's globally or in Sri Lanka. And I think women get criticized for the same things that men get praised for. And, in the cinema industry, we have this sort of female ideal. And I think the more we look at the female for their qualities or, their stories, their vulnerabilities, and, their talents, I think we can move away from the stereotypical roles. But, you know, when I look back, maybe, you know, a few years ago, there was a film, not a few years ago, a lot of years ago, a long time ago, Dadiyama by Vasanto Besekara or Akasa Kusum by Prasanna Vitanage. You know, these filmmakers made films about females and strong female characters. And, you know, it's really refreshing to see, because in a time, and I mean still, even today, we are still fighting for the equality of the male and female role. But it's so nice to see that filmmakers like them have, you know, they broke away from these stereotypes and they did these films. And I think personally, for me, I feel that this is changing, and I think change is really important, because we are a very small cinema industry, a very, very small artsy world. And I think we need to acknowledge that change, and we need to understand that any change is, you need to applaud any change. And, you know, even with payment, for example, the male actor or the female actor, I think things are changing in mainstream cinema. Actors are paid more for their skill now, and you know, a few years ago, male actors would earn way more than female actors, but now it's changing. So, you know, I'm really happy to see that as an actor.
That's great. Akasa Kusum was one of my favorite films, and Nimi Haraskama, give her a shout. She was in that movie. Thank you for being with us, Nimi. Yeah, that deserves a bit of applause, you know. The subject matter of that film was just so important and very groundbreaking. So yeah, it's worth you know, having a discussion about later. Samadhi, how are you, love?
I'm all right.
Good. Fashion and the garment industry, although glamorous on the outside, can be incredibly competitive and cutthroat. Yes. How do you manage to stay relevant and niche while maintaining an online presence?
So what you said about fashion being a very male-dominated industry, it's so true. I've actually been in many rooms where I have only been the only woman there. So I would say relevance-wise, it's just a lot of research, being up to date with what's going on. Reading global news is very important. If anyone ever wants to get into the fashion industry, please read Business of Fashion. It's like the equivalent of Economist. But in general, have a very strong mind, because it's not just about making something beautiful, it's actually a lot to do with numbers. And people do tend to take advantage of you because they think you're just the creative director or just the designer. But you need to be able to understand, read the room, and not, you know, be taken advantage of because of that creative position. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can just imagine how tough that would be. So going to you, Gianna. You know, I'm really awed by this young lady here, all of them actually. Gianna's been an activist, and from what I hear, also managed to stop that rave in the jungle, which was, yes, would have been a huge environmental issue, and probably we would have lost quite a bit of our wildlife. And
yeah, it was the hard work of a lot of people, but yeah, managed to shut it down.
And that you know, requires a huge round of applause, please. There was a moment there that, you know, reading the news, we didn't think that, you know, it could be stopped. So the fact that all of you all did that and you were part of that is fantastic. So you're an all-round activist, right? You campaign for the environment, animal rights, civil rights. So how and when did you get involved in this incredible causes?
Well, I've been asked this question a few times before, and I always answer it with the same story, because I don't have really the memory of a aha moment where I felt like, oh, I want to go out there and fight for justice. I just feel that from a young age, I was always bothered by injustice, small injustices, even as a child, seeing somebody spraying ants with morphine. Or, when I was in school, there was this fish tank, which was really dirty. I never saw these fish getting fed. People used to throw Reggie foam, like little kids would throw Reggie foam in there. And I went and continuously complained about this to the teachers and prefects and never saw anything happening. I would have been about 10 years old, grade 5, so yeah, 10. And then I used my grandfather's printer and printed out this letter from the fish, written from the perspective of the fish, asking the school why they couldn't afford to take the children to an aquarium instead of watching these fish suffer. And I went after school when I was there for like an after-school activity and secretly stuck this thing on the fish tank. And then came into school the next morning. I was so excited to see the fish tank clean with food in it, and nothing happened. One of the cleaners just took it off the fish tank, and I was so devastated. And I think I was starting to realize that just because something is brought to people's attention, it doesn't necessarily mean that things will change. And thereafter, every week that I stayed after school for this after-school activity, I would sneak off after having stolen my mother's tea strainer, which I then later confessed to her, and steal one fish a week from this fish tank. And this is before I knew the words activism or direct action or any of these things. But yeah, so I think that kind of answers the question. I've just always felt like people should, when they see injustice, stand up for what's right and do what they can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to give you the second question because you're on a roll, yeah? Civil movements and spaces are infamous for being unsafe spaces for women. Let's face it, yeah? So tell us a little bit about your experiences online and offline and what you perceive from it, because I know you were involved with the Aragalaya and other movements, so.
Well, yeah, that's a big question. Online, I'll just start with that because of the theme digital. I've been using my online platforms for a while now, years in fact, to talk about different social and environmental causes and promote different causes and try to make people think about certain issues that aren't really dominant in day-to-day life. And over the years, I've had so many online arguments, most of the time with, believe it or not, men, about, most of the time it's not even factual, like there's no factual basis for their arguments. It's just having a go at me for, I don't know, a whole host of things. Like recently, because you brought up the Deep Jungle Fest, I was posting a lot about that, and I had a guy who I don't know personally message me and bring up things to do with the Aragalaya, which was, again, it's all interconnected, but nothing really to do with Deep Jungle Fest, saying, you're the kind of girl that goes to the protest to get a free shower from the water cannons. Like, these are the kind of things they say. So online, it's just a whole different ball game because people can hide behind their screens and behind their phones and say these things to you. When we're talking about the physical spaces, it has felt unsafe on a number of occasions, but I don't think that was just me or the women or the queer people. It was everybody. Like, we felt afraid because we were being oppressed by the state and by the military and the police. And in these situations, what has been quite inspiring is to see men come and step in and protect women and protect trans comrades and have this understanding that they're in a position of privilege and power somewhat, even physically, to be able to protect us. And yeah, I can't speak for my trans comrades because I don't share their experiences, but I know that during the course of the Aragalaya, especially when we were occupying at Galle Face, there were so many instances where people felt unsafe, they were harassed. Awful things did happen. It wasn't all this, glittery, dreamy unity that was put out so much on social media. That was there, of course, to an extent, but it was like a cross-section of society, so we saw all the same problems. And I think there's so much to be done to make these spaces safer for women and queer people.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'm going to go to you, Samadhi, because I'm just going to come down the line now, okay? So in terms of modern approaches and digitization, it sticks in my mouth, digitization. You mentioned collaborating with artists and graphic designers like Movindu Binoy, who use digital mediums. So what prompted you to put the two together for your brand?
So actually, I came across Movindu maybe about a year after I started my brand. And again, I started since we're talking about digital, I didn't actually, I think all advertising agencies must be hating me because I actually just used Instagram to start my brand. So I didn't I didn't pay right at the beginning. Very sorry about that. But, just a normal day of a 25-year-old scrolling through Instagram and came across a very cool mixed media artist. And again, didn't know that it was called mixed media at that point. But as a 25-year-old going through a very intense piece, like a collage, it was a collage. I thought it was a collage, but it's actually mixed media. And it was this sort of mergence of talking, it was post-war time, very cool Nike sign in the middle of it, and it was an old Tamil lady in the midst of this piece, and I just got it. Not that I was an art specialist or anything like that. I just understood what he was trying to say. Then started, of course, following him, stalking in general, and just, and then it was just a matter of being there is so much to be said with his work, and also as a young person starting a brand, trying to be as cool and artistic as possible to, stand out from other brands, I guess. I just had a very, a thought process of why not stick his work on a t-shirt. And I mean, he and I, of course he agreed to it. But at the same time, I feel like we as two collaborators have also grown together in the last 6 years. He just did this exhibition a couple of months ago called The Survival of the Fragile, which basically spoke about women's bodies and how us women, our bodies are not the same from one year to the next. It changes, and the amount of force and the things that we go through in general, it's insane. And no one really understands that except us. And as a man, for him to understand that was pretty incredible. I would highly recommend everyone to go and have a look at his work. But yeah, in general, that's just how I came across his work and decided to slap it on.
Amazing, amazing. Dinara, in the era of digital filmmaking and modern topics, do you feel that there has been progress or evolution in the process of filmmaking and storytelling, especially for the role of a female actor?
Yeah, I definitely think so, because I feel technology has advanced in leaps and bounds over the past decade. And I think with that comes modern stories and a different form of storytelling. And I think, especially for the woman, the female actor, there's now access to a lot of amazing roles and not so stereotypical roles. I mean, if I just, in the top of my head, if I think of Sir, a film called Sir on Netflix. I don't know if anyone has seen it, but it talks about a domestic helper, and the whole film revolves around her. And this actually won many international film awards. And even if I look at a Sri Lankan film like Pangshu, which talks about a mother's struggle to find justice for her abducted son in 1988, also centers around this lady. So I think it's definitely the female role has changed over time. But at the same time, I have to mention that filmmakers need to make stories about all women. And these women may not always be strong, independent female roles, because this is our society, and that's something we also need to accept. We can't live in a bubble. This is the reality. It is a struggle, and Sri Lankan cinema does have a long way to go to see this vision come true. But I feel it is important to tell real stories as well. And, it's not always about breaking stereotypes. But at the same time, it is also about breaking stereotypes. So it's just finding that right balance.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anya, considering technology and social media, have these been opportunities to include there, I can't say the word. Who put this word in for her, especially? Digitization, online campaigns or tech-based equipment in progressing your research. So like night vision cameras, camera traps, tracking, collars, all those kinds of wonderful things. And you're talking about these small cats, right?
They're not that small.
Well, they're not like the pussycat I have at home, but they're certainly not as big as a leopard, right?
No. Yeah. They're about the size of a street dog, maybe. Yeah. So when I did start all those years back, apparently everyone starts when they're 25. It's a good age. So when I started off and I came home after uni, I got online because I was a millennial and I grew up on the internet, I guess. So, but there was nothing in Sri Lanka in terms of, so when I was Googling projects to intern for example, I couldn't find anything. Or the websites that were online were these old school HTML websites, which were horrible. And they weren't interesting. And apparently it takes like a couple of seconds for a person to get hooked to a website. So I was definitely not hooked to these. So then I discovered Instagram, and I thought, okay, let me try and, showcase the work that I want to do. Just because it's cool, it's a new animal. Well, it's not a new animal, but not a lot of people had heard about it, especially in Colombo. And just wanted to kind of use Instagram and social media as a platform to kind of raise awareness for this species. And so that's when our online presence kind of came about. And every time I met someone working in wildlife, I'd be like, you know what, you should maybe put your work up on, social media so that people can learn, because I'm a scientist, but I hate reading scientific journals because it gives me a headache, and I pop Panadols because it's just horrible. And if I can't understand some of the jargon in these papers, how can the general public understand it? So we need to start, speaking normal language to normal people so that they can understand what we're saying. Because if I come and say, the home range of a fishing cat is X, and, it's ecology and behavior, and, it's ecological niche is this and that, people are just going to kind of look at me like, what? Like what most of you all are doing right now. So, so in order to kind of get through to people and have them care about what we as scientists care about, we need to start speaking normal language. And if anyone wants to know what those words are, come and ask me after. So that's when our digital, our online platform came about. But the coolest part is the equipment. So I'm super proud. I don't toot my horn often because I don't like attention, but we were the first in the country to ever GPS collar an animal apart from an elephant. So I'm very proud of that. And we are the only people, thank you. And we were the first in the world to call GPS collar fishing cats as well, so that was pretty cool. So the equipment we use, like super high tech, really fun. I mean, we have camera traps, which generally most people use, but the tracking equipment, especially the stuff we use, no one else uses in the country. And I want to teach kids kids as in budding conservationists, how to use this equipment, because I never got to use this kind of equipment when I was, in university. And I also focus or try and focus teaching this to as many women who want to learn or go into this field, because as a female, as a woman, we don't get these opportunities because we are supposed to be, at home, not in, sewing, cooking, looking after the kids, or if we are in this field, we are supposed to be, in a lab or working with like an animal that's not going to kill you or harm you in a situation that's not dangerous. I went the opposite direction. And I want more women to be in these situations where we are working with large species, we are working with animals that could kill us. And because of that, I focus on getting female women interns, to teach them how to use this equipment, use the tracking equipment especially. And usually when I get internships, I don't know whether I should be telling my secret, but I have like a bunch of these little hurdles that my interns have to jump over. So in order to use the camera traps, you have to complete X. To get to the tracking, you have to complete everything else in front of it. But if I have a woman or like a young girl who's come in and says, I want to be a biologist, I'll let her skip everything else to get to the tracking, just because I know that she's not going to get the opportunity to use this equipment So we have a cool tech.
Good. Fantastic. Good news. Ambika, gender stereotypes are sometimes used to justify violence against women. Yeah? When it comes to online gender-based violence, how do we respond? What are the legal remedies in place in Sri Lanka, if at all?
Not sometimes. I would say gender stereotypes are used pretty much all the time, and online violence bleeds into offline violence. Offline violence is also what drives online violence. So I think we cannot deal with one without dealing with the other. And the violence in society is due to inequality. It's due to the P word that no one wants to say, which is patriarchy. It is due to sexism, misogyny, etc., etc. Now, you asked about how do we deal with it and laws. Now, I'm going to go through a list. Now, Anya mentioned, I'm glad she said, people, they're not going to understand if I use all these scientific terms. I think the purpose of law schools, one of the purposes is to actually teach you all those terms so that you can go out into the world and no one will understand you. And they're not meant to understand you, because then how could you possibly charge those high fees, right? So then the laws, so legal remedies. As I go through them, you yourself will be asking, what is this? Like, this is all outdated. What is she talking about? So, and also what you will realize is that these laws are not actually geared for this. We're using laws that were made for another purpose. We're taking different sections out of that to use for this, which is why the outcomes also tend to be, uneven and sometimes even harmful. So we have the Obscene Publications Act of 1927. This is 2023. So that is, publication of nude, semi-nude photos, but the aim of the law is not protection of women from, revenge porn and things like that. It is to protect society from these obscene publications. And of course, obscene publications, the term is not defined, which means it can also be used against various groups, societies, communities. Then we have, of course, criminal intimidation, which is 483 of the Penal Code. You can, threatening to harm someone if they don't share intimate photos, or you can say if you can threaten to release the photos if they don't do something that you want. Then we have cheating by impersonation, which is 399 of the Penal Code, where someone pretends to be someone else. This happens, they create fake accounts. They pretend to be someone else to get your intimate photos. Then, of course, there is the Computer Crimes Act of 2007. We use that as well. But the purpose of that is unauthorized access of a computer. So you can see the aim is not protection of women. And of course, if there are threats of violence, you can also obtain protection. In theory, you can obtain protection orders using the Prevention of Domestic Violence Act 2005. But everyone knows, and also we see that DIG Renuka is here, I'm sure she can tell us also through experience, how difficult it is for women to get orders, because even men, they're driven by, the sexism, so even policemen can, under the law, get the orders for women, but they are reluctant. Judges are reluctant to give the orders. So you face obstacles at every point. You can take civil action, but of course, we talked about the high fees. It is also cumbersome and it is very expensive. Then, of course, when women go to lodge complaints, I'm sure DIG herself has received complaints like this from many women, whether they've gone to their local police station to lodge the complaints, and what they face there is, more harassment, being ignored. They ask you very personal questions in the middle of the police station, so everyone in the village will know within 1 hour of you leaving the police station. And of course, we have the Victim and Witness Protection Act, which does have provisions to protect the privacy of a person. But of course, this too is observed in the breach. Now, finally, there was a study that this is to show the root of the problem, is a study done by Grassroots Trust, where they asked boys why they circulated intimate photos of their girlfriends. What do you think they said? They said that because they belonged to them. So this is about sense of ownership. This is about women being, as looked as property. It's about sense of entitlement, which means we come back to the same old thing, patriarchy. And the fact that our laws also tend to be drafted mostly by men without public consultation, not gender sensitive, and we're using outdated laws to deal with problems that are constantly progressing so fast we can't keep track of them.
Absolutely right. So how important is development in digital literacy and access to the digital sphere in women, girls and queer persons, in providing a better chance to ensure their human rights?
Actually, because I kind of knew you were going to ask this, I went and did some research, and what I found is really fascinating. Because, in, I think, maybe our time, because I'm much older also than them, is, it was digital literacy, I think, meant something very different to also what it means today. Because now it also, you need to have algorithmic literacy. Now, I found someone named Dr. Tina Bucher, who is a very interesting, written a lot of papers, where she talks about these algorithms. And what she says is they are not technical, they are not neutral. We always say, particularly today's, International Women's Day, feminism, women's rights, we say the personal is the political. What she's saying is algorithms are political because they determine what you see and what you do not see, what is visible and what is hidden. And to be a good citizen, you not only need to know about the Constitution, which sadly not many Sri Lankans also do know, so we do need that kind of civic literacy in Sri Lanka, but you also need literacy in this to understand, protection of rights. So then I came across another researcher called Frank Pascal, who describes society as a black box society. What does he mean? He means that corporations are mining personal data and they're connecting the dots. So information against on you can be weaponized in many ways. So who is this weaponization targeting? It is targeting women, it is targeting minorities, it's targeting LGBTIQ persons, it's targeting the poor. So digital literacy or your ability to access this also has a lot to do with your position in society and your privilege. So for instance, the government brought or tried to bring about a digital ID. National ID card, a digital, and they were gathering, or they would have gathered all sorts of private information. Some people thought it was a great idea. It really petrified me, because to think that such data would be in a central place and the repository is a government or the state. Forget governments, they come and go, but the Sri Lankan state is historically, it's abusive. And we need to be really afraid of it and what kind of data it has in its possession. And so, of course, that there's litigation still ongoing related to that. So we think that technology has the potential to be an equalizer, but it's also a tool that exacerbates inequality. You mentioned about the digital gap. So South Asia, if you're looking at ownership of mobile phones, South Asia has the highest gap between men and women, 23%. And there too, it's about the quality. Women, they say, this was a study done by UNICEF, women buy cheaper phones. They buy phones that are less sophisticated, which means they are able to use fewer facilities. And that also probably goes back to the fact that, you know, women, particularly if they have families, are not going to be spending money on phones. And once again, that whole thing about who is responsible for the family. So once again, we come back to that P word, which is, you know, patriarchy.
I think I'm getting rid of my Facebook tomorrow. Yeah, it's quite frightening, actually. Anya, STEM, S-T-E-M. First of all, what is STEM? And notoriously, it lacks female participation in Sri Lanka, especially in hands-on fields like conservation. What lacks have you noticed, and in what ways can we encourage higher participation? STEM.
Okay, I got stuck on STEM. I was concentrating more on that. Science, technology. No, I don't. Can you?
STEM.
Okay.
No.
I know the first two words as science, technology, something, engineering, and maths. Engineering and maths. I'm not good at it. That's why I forgot
So you know why I didn't know it.
What was the rest of the question?
So it notoriously. Hello. No, this is working now. Yes, thank you. Especially in fields like conservation. So what lacks have you noticed, and in what ways can we encourage? You can blame Shadia for this STEM business, yeah? So, yeah.
So what lacks in terms of, oh my God, in terms of women being in STEM? What's kind of preventing them from being in STEM? Okay. Lack of participation. I think it's just so male dominated. Like if you ever go for like a wildlife conference or just like if you watch wildlife documentaries on TV, it's always a man, right? He's got his female sidekick, but it's just always the man who's like, why can't there be like a female Bear Grylls? Like I like pick up fishing cat poop and smell it. I can be a Bear Grylls, right? Like, I am him. I'm the you version. Yeah, I mean, like, we don't see that being represented on TV, right? And even in like our local, like just any situation, it's always like it's just a room full of men, and then it's just you standing there like wondering, oh God, what's happening? So I think that kind of scares a lot of women going into the field. But I did notice, because I went to one of the local universities to do some lab work, there are a lot of women students, you know, girls just, you know, studying biology and wildlife conservation. And then I was just thinking to myself, where do they go once they graduate? Like, what in the world happens? And then I realized they're shoved into labs, or they're shoved into like, you know, some programming job, or lecturers, you know. None of them go into the field because the field is for men. Men are the ones who trudge in the mud. Men are the ones who get dark in the sun. They're the ones who run if like a leopard chases them. We're not supposed to do that, apparently. So I think that, so when we as women don't see that, we get scared to kind of go into that. But I was lucky enough and privileged enough to like have a mom who was like, do whatever you want. Like, I don't care, just don't get killed. So I had that push to go into this field. And like, not a lot of girls, especially in this country, get that opportunity. And that's sad. And I hope that changes.
Yeah, I hope so too, because I mean, you know, We really need to have more participation of women in all spheres. It doesn't necessarily have to be, oh, the jungle is too dangerous. I grew up in the jungle. I know how dangerous it can be.
It's fun, right?
But if you know the jungle, you know what to expect. Yeah. Dinara, you secured the lead role in Prasanna Vitanaga's cinematic masterpiece, Gadi, Children of the Sun. Did I pronounce that right? Yeah. Which had an electrifying storyline together with incredible performances. The cinematic journey highlights social issues that create divide among people. What are your thoughts on utilizing art and cinema in addressing social divide and discrimination?
I think art and cinema are huge platforms to, you know, give out a very, you know, a message to a large audience. And art can be anything from a 30-second video on Instagram or, you know, something on YouTube. I feel like art can be anything, and if done correctly, it can have a huge impact. So the film that I did, Gadi, it's an 1815 Kandyan kingdom story, and it talks about the Rhodia caste at that time, and they were the outcasts in society, and you know, it's basically their story, and it's this Tikiri's journey of survival, the girl I play. But apart from all of that, when we screened this film in Kandy, I had someone come up to me after the screening and tell me, you know, he came and he said, "Thank you so much for showing this film. I just want to let you know I'm from the Rhodia caste." And, you know, I was quite amazed that he came and spoke to me. And, you know, he said this because caste doesn't matter anymore. And, you know, I mean, I know it's still prevalent in certain areas in Sri Lanka, but, and then he said, you know, what you showed on screen, what all of you showed on screen, is actually what my family went through, and thank you for addressing these social issues. So I feel it's really important that, you know, as filmmakers and as artists, we use this platform given to us to talk about social issues and to talk about discrimination, because, you know, even with this film, we didn't, you know, I didn't know too many details about the Rhodia caste till I actually did it, and I think we don't learn these in schools as well unless you study history for your further studies or something. So I think it's a great way of sending a message across to a large audience.
And you mentioned something very important, you know, they don't teach us these things in school. So I think that, I mean, even basic sexual education is not taught in schools. Lessons or education about sexual orientation, gender identity, expression is not taught in schools. Everybody sort of shies away from, you know, approaching these subjects. So this one, I guess that's the next battle, schools. I'm not sure I have the nerve to go there. Samadhi, as a rising female presence in the corporate and creative world, what challenges have you met against in this aspect, and how have you tackled some of it?
So I'm actually quite new to the corporate sector. Only like 4 to 5 months in. I've been working for myself for a very long time. So again, it comes to the whole idea of being a creative in the corporate sector, because they really don't take you seriously. And also it's like creative plus female. They think, easy, like can easily get around her and like figure our way out kind of thing. So it's been a work in progress, I'd say. But in general, I forgot the last bit, sorry. Sorry, tackling, and then
yeah, I think
just
it's about
sorry.
How have you tackled some of the challenges that
So yeah, like I said, like creative and being a woman in the corporate sector, coming out of nowhere, and also it's so, I don't know if this is a common thing that people ask you in the corporate sector, but they always ask you, which company did you work for before? And if it's not a known company, they don't take you seriously. And especially when I said, oh, I have a brand, then it's almost like, okay, like your brand has failed, that's why you're here, you know? So it's it's a work in progress, and I always feel like they, like I said, they don't take creatives that seriously. And I think with time, again, I think social media has sort of helped creatives come out of their shell, because also in Sri Lanka, we are a very academic-driven country, where if you're not a lawyer, an engineer, or a doctor, like, good luck to you. So in general, I feel like social media has kind of helped creatives come out. So it's, like I said, it's a work in progress. I hope I answered that question. I'm very sorry. But yeah, just in general, it's hard, and there's a long way to go, especially for females in corporates. Yeah, and I think the company that I'm working for is progressive compared to a lot of the other companies. And I think they're working towards a more 50-50, yeah.
Yes, and of course, companies in general in Sri Lanka, and we've just started with Equal Ground in 2015 doing diversity and inclusion programs within companies to accept LGBTIQ persons in the workplace. And I guess, things should be, maybe they are a bit better for women in the workplace, but I don't think it's that much better.
Yeah, so something I've actually noticed is like the age, right? So I'm actually one of the older people in the company.
I don't believe that.
It's so surprisingly true. And I feel very old, but that's because because I guess Daraz is a fast-paced platform and company, it's almost like they work very hard, and then I think, like, I remember this one girl who left, she said she's getting married and she can't continue working because her husband said she can't work in the workplace because there's more men than women.
Oops.
Okay. Right? So there is this idea of all these girls coming in when they've just graduated and they're doing so well and really killing it, and then halfway through, it's almost like there's like a little gap in the company, and then there are older ladies coming in maybe after having kids, or so it's there's like a massive gap in the middle.
Yeah. Gianna, last question. No, I'm going to throw you a curveball later on. But as a young activist who is frequently inside volatile spaces, what do you feel needs to be addressed in terms of freedom to protest and safe spaces, especially for women and queer persons?
I feel like there are so many things to address, but most of them are not unique to these sort of spaces. It's pretty much the same things that need to be addressed in the wider society. And if those things are addressed, and the way it would filter through would naturally make these kind of spaces more safe and inclusive for all people, if that makes sense. And that comes, again, I think down to, sorry to parrot, but education on a school level, and children learning at a young age that they can stand for what they believe in and stand for what they want to protect, and that they will be safe if they do so. But that's not going to be taught unless there are the mechanisms in place to ensure their safety, because right now nobody's going to tell their young kids or tell their students in school, like, oh yeah, you should go and be an activist and protest and stand up for, your rights. Like, no, you're going to get tear gassed and cannoned and beaten up and chased, and then there'll be a whole smear campaign against you as well. But I think also it's just coming back to, it kind of relates, but to what Anya was talking about and what she was asked about women in STEM. Like, I was one of those young girls that wanted to be a woman in STEM, and had I come for an event like this and heard Anya talk or watched this on YouTube live, then I would have maybe been doing more what she's doing. And I kind of went the other way to protect animals because I felt like, okay, who does this in Sri Lanka? Like, how will I be able to do this? And funnily enough, I actually worked for Anya for 1 year, I have to say that, as her social media person. So funny here that we're sitting together on this digital panel. But yeah, and then I also ended up doing things like safari, apart from activism, where it was like, okay, if I can't be a researcher, I'll be a safari guide. And then surprise, surprise, it was again a fully, like everyone has said on this panel, it was a male-dominated industry where nobody listens when I talk, nobody listens when I track. And yeah, so it's the same in all these spaces. It feels kind of unsafe when you're always a minority. And I think one of the other things that we can do is just relying on our own networks and on our own circles. I have a friend in the audience as well that was herself a victim of this online harassment, which was like targeted smear campaigns in Naragale, where she was like compared to an avatar and stuff, just because she went and told the media, please have some integrity and like report properly. She was feeling really unsafe because of this targeted campaign, and it was because of this GGG women's circle and our own networks of people that were able to support each other and be there for each other and step in when there are no, things in place to provide you with that feeling of protection. So yeah, I feel like we have, you said yourself in your opening speech, like how much Equal Ground has had to do over the years to achieve what you have achieved. And that's a very drawn out and noble pursuit, but it's, I think, also not waiting for the people in power to give us this top-down change, but to go out and make the change. Yeah.
Cool. So, well done. So this question is for all of you, so you can answer. You can go first, Ambika. But and this is a bit of a redundant question for you because you already, do so much for the LGBT community. So I was going to ask, how can you contribute currently and with your expertise to ensure the rights of the LGBTIQ community? Pull your paper out and read it out loud.
What can I do? Well,
you already do such a lot.
No.
Yeah.
I think, see, what we have in Sri Lanka in the human rights community is that people function in silos. So we have LGBTIQ community, LGBTIQ rights, and you have those groups and activists, and then you have women's rights groups, etc. Then you have groups that work on general democracy, accountability, transparency issues. So we work in silos, and there are many times when the issues are intersecting. And we need to have a more collaborative, supportive way of working, because sometimes the LGBTIQ community may not know how a particular law affects them. They might think it does not. And when other human rights activists do the analysis, maybe they will also miss it. And therefore, you might not speak out against it, or you might just, there have been instances also of that. So therefore, I think we need to take an intersectional approach to issues. That's the first thing. We should not work in silos, and we need to be more inclusive. So for instance, when we have discussions, let's say, maybe on the 21st Amendment to the Constitution, and when you invite groups, they might not always invite all the LGBTI groups, right? And they themselves might not think that it's relevant. And that is how I think the collective voice is weakened. So I would say my suggestion to the human rights groups and community is that take an intersectional approach, don't work in silos, be more inclusive, and at the end of the day, one person's or one community's rights are violated, it means sooner or later all our rights are going to be violated. Please, understand that, work from that basis.
Thank you. Very true. The question is to you then, the same thing. How can fishing cats, I love cats, by the way, and how can you contribute currently and with your expertise to ensure the rights of the LGBTQ? This is a trick question, you know this, right? Yeah.
I mean, being in wildlife, I mean, I'm sorry, but I don't know how I could do much except like encourage LGBTQ like to come in and start working. If that's, I mean, if that's I mean, if I'm seeing such few women, like women representatives, I mean, it's probably it's a lot less from this community. But I mean, don't be afraid, because there are people like me who are willing to teach and are willing to pass on whatever knowledge we have, you know. So just don't be afraid to apply, or just contact us and say, hey, you know, I'm thinking about going into this field. Can you help me? Can we tag along and learn? You know.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think the cinema industry and the theatre industry, I mean, that's where I come from. And I think compared to the rest of the industries in Sri Lanka, I feel we are way more inclusive. And I don't know if I'm just biased, or I don't know. I don't think I am. I feel we are way more inclusive in terms of, you know, having people from different communities. And like, I don't know, I don't have the power to cast people in roles because I'm not a filmmaker, but I think the most basic thing would be auditions. Like, I think auditions should be accessible to all, whether it doesn't matter if you're, you know, your gender or your religion or your caste or whatever, where you come from doesn't matter. And I think that's like a basic thing. But I also feel like you need to treat people with equality, and I think that's really, really important. I believe you should do to others what you would have them do to you. So it's just simple. Be inclusive. That's, yeah.
It's very biblical, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Samadhi.
I was going to say actually that the fashion industry is quite like more inclusive. Because I just think in general, if I'm talking globally, in the last like 15 years or so, people have started talking more about the LGBT community and being more inclusive. There has been, and I guess it also is part of social media as well, but in general, there has been more information, and with the designers coming out and being very inclusive, there's androgynous dressing now and fluid dressing. There's so much that you can say with clothing. And I feel like locally as well, I think the schools, the academies that are in Sri Lanka are also very inclusive, and they have helped a lot of students even come out and help them with their careers. So I feel that there has been quite a, I think even from the parents, and supportive and, you know, things like that. So I'd like to think we're very inclusive.
Yeah,
Yes.
maybe. But, you know, inclusive is one thing, but you talk about, you know, parents' approvals and various things like that. Not all of us have that, especially from the rural areas.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get a more city-based, you know, LGBTIQ person, perhaps their experience is quite different from living in, you know, someplace in a rural area and trying to make it in whatever field that they want to, with all of the, you know, troubles they face, the pressure they face of being who they are in a rather hostile environment. Yeah, things are getting better, of course. Gianna?
I mean, just to follow what you said, I was discussing the panel questions for today with my partner before coming here, and talking about when we were in school, and hearing from his perspective, having gone to a boys' school, and remembering some of the things my brother had told me about these kids, boys especially, not even necessarily gay boys, but just slightly more effeminate boys even, and how they've just been bullied and nobody really stands with them. And so I guess the way I would be able to help is be that person that would stand with that bullied kid, even though I'm no longer in school. But when we look at it on a larger scale, I mean, during Pride Week, while GGG was still around, we saw a lot of people, activists that had been in the activist spheres from before the Aragalaya, coming out for Pride, which was, I mean, I don't know how it has been in all the previous years, but that was amazing because we didn't have people coming there purely for one reason. It's that understanding that all injustice, all oppression is linked. So the issues and the discrimination faced by the LGBTQ community is something that we all should be standing for with them. And just not being a gatekeeper of skills, like the ladies just said before me. I mean, I dabble in lots of different freelance work, so if anybody were to want me to share these skills and knowledge with them and how to get in, or just being a friend to somebody who's coming into an industry where they might not have that friend or, you know, be discriminated against, I think that's where I would be able to help.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here, sharing your experiences. Yeah, we're very grateful for your time and your commitment. And we have a little gift for each and every one of you because I feel gifts are very necessary. Yeah. Ambika, thank you so much. Anya, thank you. Just a little something. It's just a memento. Thank you. Here you go, sweetheart. Can we hear it once more for this amazing panel? Thank you. Okay. We can go. Yeah. I'm giving it to my staff here to take care of business. Yeah.
Thanks, Rosanna. Thank you to everyone who participated and to the panelists for enlightening us with their unique experiences and expert knowledge. We hope you walk away tonight with valuable insight and inspiration going forward. We'd like to now...
We forgot one big thing. Question and answers.
Yeah.
So stay up here one more second.
Yeah, we'd like
Terrible
to now
host I am. Yeah.
Invite the
I think
audience
I've
to
been sitting
present
down
any
too much.
questions.
Yeah. Does anybody have a question for... Yes. Please keep your questions really short, please. Yeah.
First of all, happy Women's Day. My question is, the Constitution is the main part playing the big role, whatever we need to implement, repeal the ACTO, the penal code in whatever. So, in the legislative body of Sri Lanka, the number of percentage for the women is very low. But we say, always we tell the first woman's premier is from Sri Lanka. But actually it is by the generation politics or family politics, by the SWRD Bandaranaike, at the time the spouse became the premier. But in the grassroots level, in the engaging politics or participation to become the elect member of parliament in the legislative body, the percentage and interest is very low. How we can overcome this? I asked the Ambika Satyanathan, the legislator, also on that one.
Yeah. She's not a legislator. Maybe we should ask the politicians in the room. But no, they're ducking that. You want to take a stab at that?
How do we change it? Well, there are multiple ways. There are there are less difficult ways and there are difficult ways. The less difficult, of course, would be, quotas, right? We have a quota already for women and youth in the local government, but the implementation was not great. And of course, there's a lot of opposition to quotas at the parliamentary level. So that opposition once again goes back to what we said about inequality in society, sexism, etc. The women don't deserve it. That the fact that people do not understand historical and structural discrimination, which means that these are embedded and it's very difficult for women to, get beyond them. You do need a helping hand, which is why they're called affirmative action. So that would be one. The other thing is, I think there is actually, if you go to the grassroots, there is quite a bit of interest and a lot of involvement of women in political parties and politics at that level, but they don't always kind of smoothly come up because political parties themselves are not democratic. Political parties themselves don't have women within their decision-making structures, which means when time comes to, give nominations, you don't find women being given. Even if they do, they really don't have the money. Then, of course, there is the violence, there is all that, right? Which means you can tackle it, kind of in a targeted way, like, for instance, giving quotas. But if you do not tackle, like, for instance, if you talk to women who have been elected to the local government bodies, right? They speak of the sexism they face. The fact that they can't speak, the fact that they have trouble with their male colleagues in that sphere. So you can get there, but then what happens to you after you get there? That also matters. So it is, I think, a multi-pronged approach at multiple levels.
No, quick way of doing it. I think also, judging from my experience of seeing what happens in Parliament, when you've got people screaming in filth at women and stuff like that in Parliament, I wouldn't want to go there. Kirunika, my hat's off to you, my dear. Any other questions? Yes, Rai, a comment?
So thanks for stopping the deep jungle rave as such, or being somewhat responsible for it. But I was very disappointed that the person in charge of organizing it, or the people who even gave permission to let it go, their names were not said. No newspaper article ever mentioned the organizer.
So hello? Yeah, the thing is, that whole campaign was led by just a small group and just individuals. And I think the media also kind of dropped it afterwards. But what we found out when we were investigating was that the organizer who put it together, and this is why the whole thing was somewhat controversial, he really wanted to bring some sort of economic activity to the area. He, unfortunately, and I feel bad somewhat to say this, he just didn't have the foresight and the ability to look at it from an ecological perspective. And apparently he's also an elephant tracker, which makes it even more ridiculous. But he was saying he was looking at the poverty and the fact that there's hardly any tourism now, and he wanted something that was going to bring money to those people. But then when we, break it down, 4 days of partying isn't really going to solve the fact that there's an economic crisis in the country and these people maybe get some labor costs and do their stalls. But yeah, the sponsors all pulled out. The sponsors, overnight said, oh, we have nothing to do with this. We're not the sponsors anymore. And then it was also it was like a pass the ball game between the different government officers that had given their permission and then withdrawn it. So yeah, nobody was at fault, nobody was responsible, and there were no sponsors. That's how it works. Sad.
Thank you so much. I think we're going to close it up now because I think we're running slightly late, and I'm sure you're all hungry and thirsty and, need some sustenance. So food is going to be served outside. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. I'm so happy to see a full house. We're really happy to see all of you here as well. Been a great source of support for the LGBTIQ community. Hey, it's not over until it's over. So we have to fight a lot more, because we don't want anything slipping through the cracks in a hurry to push something that might not be sound. I think Ambika has explained to you how dangerous this can be. So please, everybody, especially to the activists in the room, don't give up and don't relax. There's no time to relax. It's our lives. Yeah? Thank you so much.